Surprise! Apple just announced updated models for the iPad Air and the iPad Mini. Some of us had given up on seeing new versions of these models, but suddenly they're available for purchase. We should have our hands on the new tablet sometime this week, but we wanted to give you a quick rundown on what's new and what remains the same for both iPads. So let's kick off with what's new with the iPad Air, which we thought was effectively replaced with the 10.5-inch iPad Pro in 2017. In essence, this is the iPad Air 3, but as much with the iPad Mini, Apple's dropping the numerals. It's now just the iPad Air. The price sees a welcome change as Apple now sells it for a starting price of $499 instead of the $649 we saw with the iPad Air 2. There's also a change in storage options as Apple only sells the new iPad Air in 64GB and 256GB configurations. Before, you could buy the iPad Air 2 with 16, 32, 64, and 128GB options. It's a smart move for a more data-hungry age. The tablet is also bigger in so much that it has the same 9.8 by 6.8 inch frame as the 2017 10.5-inch iPad Pro. So for comparison, the iPad Air 2 measured 9.4 by 6.67 inches. And much like the old iPad Pro, the new iPad Air supports the first generation Apple Pencil. That could be a big deal if you don't want to pay iPad Pro prices, but you like the smaller screen of the 9.7-inch iPad, or now the 7.9-inch iPad Mini. In addition, the iPad Air now supports its own $159 smart keyboard that you'll need to buy separately. I especially like that the new iPad Air sports the A12 Bionic processor that we find in the iPhone XS and XR, which marks a massive jump over the 8X chip in the iPad Air 2. Keep in mind, though, that it's not quite as fast as the A12X chips that we find in the 2018 iPad Pros. The display has changed too, as the resolution is now 2224 by 1668, up from 2048 by 1536. It's also packed with Apple's True Tone technology that adapts to ambient light in order to deliver a more natural viewing experience. That display is also laminated, which effectively means the glass sits on top of the display. When you use an Apple Pencil, it makes for an experience that feels slightly more like writing on paper than what you'll get with an unlaminated display. It's also brighter, as it delivers 500 nits of brightness versus the 415 in the older iPad Air. That'll be great if you often have to use your iPad in sunlight. And last, but certainly not least, the front-facing FaceTime camera got a big boost from 1 megapixel to 7 megapixels. That's a lot of good stuff, especially when you compare it to the iPad Air 2. When you compare it to the 10.5-inch iPad Pro, though, the truth is that we're basically looking at an iPad Pro from 2017 with a better chip. In other words, if you got your 10.5-inch iPad Pro 2 years ago, you may not need to upgrade. The new model still has a home button with Touch ID, and I think that's a bit of a bummer, as the latest iPad Pros have taught me that Face ID is even better suited for iPads than iPhone. It's still LED backlit, so don't expect the super cool OLED displays you find in the new iPhones. Even the new iPad Pro doesn't have that. And while the FaceTime camera got a big boost, the rear camera hasn't changed much, as it still has an 8 megapixel rear camera like the iPad Air 2. It's still got a 3.5mm headphone jack, it's still sold in space gray, silver, and gold, and it still gives you a battery life of around 10 hours. And it still supports lightning cables instead of USB-C. So let's move on to the new iPad Mini. I know a lot of you have been waiting for this one for a long time, and as you might expect after a 4-year wait, it's a massive improvement over the iPad Mini 4. So, what's new? First off, much as with the iPad Air, this is now simply called the iPad Mini, even though it's essentially the iPad Mini 5. It also sports the A12 Bionic processor, and that's enough of an upgrade from the A8 chip to give you around 3 times the graphics processing power of the iPad Mini 4. It's also got a laminated display and first-generation Apple Pencil support like the iPad Air, along with support for Apple's True Tone technology. It even has a wider P3 color gamut, and Apple says its pixel density of 3 million is the highest of any iPad. The display itself is 25% brighter at 500 nits, up from the 450 in the iPad Mini 4. So the camera remains at 8 megapixels, but the newer model reportedly offers better low-light performance and HD video recording. And here again, we see the boost from 7 megapixels all the way up from 1 megapixel in the front-facing camera. The iPad Mini 4 only sold in a 125GB configuration, but the new iPad Mini comes with both 64GB and 256GB storage options. For that matter, it now supports the same Wi-Fi and gigabit class LTE speeds that you'll find in the new iPads. So what hasn't changed? Well, for one, there's that starting price, which remains the same as the iPad Mini 4 at $399. I want to be annoyed with that, considering that the 9.7-inch iPad also supports the Apple Pencil, and it gives you more screen space, and it only sells for $329. Nonetheless, this delivers a lot of upgrades for people who want a smaller iPad. As for the display, it may have that True Tone tech and the wider P3 color gamut, but the 7.9-inch display itself still has a resolution of just 2046 by 1536. In fact, I'm probably going to have a hard time telling the iPad Mini 4 apart from the new iPad Mini when we get ours. So it's still got the same 8 by 5.3 inch frame, it's still got a home button that supports Touch ID, it still supports lightning cables instead of USB-C, and yes, it still comes in space gray, silver, and gold, and it still delivers around 10 hours of battery life. I know a lot of you have been looking forward to getting your hands on a new iPad Mini in particular, so I look forward to seeing if both of these devices live up to expectations. We should have our reviews for both models ready within the next 2 weeks, so be sure to subscribe to Macworld and check them out when they drop.